today comes from the book of Luke, chapter 9, verses 28 through 45. Today, as you may have known from some of our liturgy and other things, is known as Transfiguration Sunday. It's one of the high holy days of the church liturgical year. We celebrate Transfiguration Sunday every Sunday before the season of Lent begins. And so this story of Jesus' Transfiguration, we're going to hear the Luke version. And this is how that story goes. Now about 8 days after these sayings of Jesus, Jesus took with him Peter and James and John and went on the mountain to pray. And while he was praying, the appearance of his face changed, and his clothes became dazzling white. Suddenly they saw two men, Moses and Elijah, talking to him. They appeared in glory and were speaking of his departure, which he was about to accomplish in Jerusalem. Now Peter and his companions were weighed down with sleep, but since they had stayed awake, they saw his glory as the two men who stood with him. Just as they were leaving him, Peter said to Jesus, "Master, it is good for us to be here. Let us make 3 dwellings, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah," not knowing what he had said. While he was saying this, a cloud came and overshadowed them, and they were terrified as they entered the cloud. Then from the cloud came a voice that said, "This is my son, the beloved. Listen to him." When the voice had spoken, Jesus was found alone. And they kept silent, and in those days told no one of any of the things they had seen. On the next day, when they had come down from the mountain, a great crowd met him. Just then a man from the crowd shouted, "Teacher, I beg you to look at my son. He is my only child." Suddenly a spirit seizes him, and all at once he shrieks. It convulses him until he foams at the mouth. It mauls him and will scarcely leave him. I begged your disciples to cast it out, but they could not. Jesus answered, "You faithless and perverse generation, how much longer must I be with you and bear with you? Bring your son here." While he was coming, the demon dashed him to the ground in convulsions. But Jesus rebuked the unclean spirit, healed the boy, and gave him back to his father. And all were astounded at the greatness of God. While everyone was amazed at all that he was doing, Jesus said to his disciples, "Let these words sink into your ears. The Son of Man is going to be betrayed into human hands." But they did not understand this saying. Its meaning was concealed from them, so that they could not perceive it. And they were afraid to ask him about this saying. This is the good news of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God. Will you please pray with me? Gracious and loving God, may these words of my mouth and this meditation from my heart be filled with your Spirit and filled with your truth. And may it be heard with open ears and open hearts and open minds, and bring us a message that we need to hear for our lives today, for our world today, for our church today, and for your eternal kingdom. Amen. The heat means it's dry. They're called mountaintop experiences. One of a kind, climactic moments when we find ourselves standing, literally or figuratively or both, on top of the world. Mountaintop experiences are characterized as exhilarating and inspiring, often soul-transforming and life-changing. Mountaintop experiences can happen at any point in our lives. Life coach Robert Rome says, most of us have had some type of mountaintop experience during our lifetime. Perhaps it was getting our driver's license at the age of 16. It could have been graduating from college and then stepping into a dream job. Maybe it was getting married and having children. In any case, whenever something really wonderful happens to us, our excitement causes us to view it as one of life's Mountaintop experiences. As a Cubs fan, I can definitely say one of my mountaintop experiences, I think you know what I'm saying, was in November of 2018, after I think it was 107, 108 years, the Cubs finally won a World Series. And it wasn't just that, but it was that I got to watch the World Series in my dad's room at the nursing home. My dad was one of the hugest Cub fans in the world, so we got to celebrate that together, and I got to witness Dad taste the last sips of gin he would ever drink in celebration. It was a really great night, and my dad passed away 6 months later, so I really cherish that especially special mountaintop experience. In the church life, in the life of faith, in the life of the church, mountaintop experiences are very valued and very much sought for. Youth church camp is often a place where mountaintop experiences are made known to occur, especially with young people, and especially during campfire time at the end of the day. At some point, often the last night of camp, campers will have some profound experience of God, an awareness of God's closeness, God's love for us and for everyone around us, of God's call on our lives. Many have received their call to ordained ministry during a church camp mountaintop experience. And the Bible contains all sorts of mountaintop experiences, and many actually on literal mountains. One of the most famous took place with Moses, as God calls him up Mount Sinai. And there's this burning bush at the top of the mountain, and out of the burning bush comes this voice, where Moses is called on this amazing journey to rescue the Hebrew slaves from oppression in Egypt and take them through the wilderness and into the promised land. It's one of the greatest journeys in the history of whatever, and certainly perhaps the most seminal call and experience in the Bible. And it all took place on a mountain, with a mountaintop experience. And then there's the mountaintop experience of Elijah, a great prophet in the Old Testament who's called up to Mount Carmel and to wrest the people's allegiance to false gods. Everybody's been worshiping Baal. And so Elijah goes up and has a kind of bake-off with the 450 priests of Baal who are up there. And he's able to slay those 450 priests basically with one arm tied behind his back because, God, the real God, is behind him. And so that's a fantastic story, a fantastic victory, even bigger than, the Cubs. At least it was shorter. And then there's other big mountaintop experiences. There's the vision that David has, King David, as he sees atop Mount Zion, the temple that he is going to begin building. It's going to continue on with Solomon. And this is one of the most sacred visions in our Bible, the church on top of God's holy mountain. And the mountaintop experience that Abraham and Isaac have, when they're called up to a tall mountain somewhere, and God has said that Abraham is to sacrifice his son. And then at the last minute, that's called off, and we're so glad that Abraham and Isaac are up on that mountain, because you can hear God better, because it's up there by heaven, and he's saved. There are so many good things that happen with mountaintop experiences, and they're characterized as being honorable and heroic, and with stunning victories and spectacular achievement, and abundance of divine presence, of course, because we're so high up, literally or figuratively. And the kind of week that we've been having now, especially in the United Methodist Church, we could sure use one of those grand, glorious, spectacular, nice and clean mountaintop experiences. So bring it on! And thankfully, we get one. Today, the mountaintop experience we hear about is all about Jesus and his disciples. Perfect, because we're disciples of Jesus today. So we can know we're going to learn a lot. We can find a lot of hope in what happened back in biblical times. This is great. Bring it on. So we're told Jesus calls some of his disciples, the top ones, pun I suppose intended, to head up the mountain with him, to be with him as he prays. They travel up the very high, very steep Mount Tabor, and we're treated to watching what happens when Jesus sets down to the business at hand, praying. He transforms. he transfigures into this spectacular, otherworldly vessel of pure light. I can only imagine it's something like the end of Close Encounters of the Third Kind, when all this spectacular machinery and light-filled beings come in and they just take our breath away. It must have been something like that, but even greater, of course, because this is God and God's Son that we are thinking about. And then, on top of all that, making things even more fantastic, otherworldly vessels of light, Mountaintop experience experts Moses and Elijah also descend and confer. Maybe the three of them are comparing awe-inspiring Mountaintop experience notes. Then we're told Peter, always the overly enthusiastic overachiever, excitedly jumps into action, announcing he's getting the disciples to start to construct 3 shrines to honor and memorialize and celebrate this convergence of glowing guests. It's clearly the proper and hospitable thing to do, both welcoming them and with the deference they deserve, plus shrines make it helpful for others to come and visit later. Because of course there's still going to be some divine sacred residue from this appearance, and so you want to make it helpful for people in later generations to come and enjoy and take in this divine experience that happened a long time ago. This is all very important and time-honored work. But we're told a holy cloud then envelops these now busy men doing their important work. And what happens next? Well, as best I can tell, they get yelled at. This is my son, the beloved. Listen to him. In other words, stop all the doing and put down the stuff and stop everything and put all your energy into listening to Jesus. Just stop it. Now, if you haven't had a parent that's ever talked like that to you, well, then you just haven't had a parent long enough. The call is to stop what we're doing, just to listen. Don't even talk to Jesus. Don't even give your input. Just receive. Okay, that's what we're going to do. So what happens next? First, it's an encounter with a mother and her sick son. And John throws the disciples considerable shade, as it's reported they are still unable to perform healings. They just don't have enough faith. So they get yelled at again. You faithless and perverse generation, how much longer must I be with you and bear with you? Then it's a reiteration of what's coming up. The Son of Man will be betrayed in human hands and then executed on the cross. The disciples don't understand it. How could they? This amazingly divine being, whose amazing divinity they've gotten to see with their own eyes, is going to be captured by imperial soldiers? Shouldn't a divine being be able to break those chains? And how in the world can he allow himself to suffer the most horrible, shameful of deaths, that on the cross? Clearly, this is a different kind of mountaintop experience. It's not about celebrating some fantastic victory or receiving some exciting call or receiving some honor that can't help but pump up your ego. It's about receiving the ultimate divine command, shedding everything else to embrace the divine command. Listen to Jesus. Even if it means being totally confused, or even worse, realizing there are miles to go before you sleep. Tough, messy encounters and realizations that, like crucifixion, no one in their right mind wants to go through. Except that after that, and only after that, comes Easter. It has been a hugely difficult, distressing, infuriating, and scary week for we United Methodists. Our leaders, delegates to the special annual conference, traveled up the mountain, as it were, going to St. Louis to pray, and it was hoped, ratify some sort of great and glorious plan that would make wholly official full inclusion of LGBTQI people in the life and leadership of the Methodist Church. This is something we've been doing here at our Methodist church for quite some time already. We've been paving the way. While none of the plans were perfect, our denomination is very large, and we've always had a large theological tent that embraces lots of different strains of thought and belief. The idea that we need to learn to love people beyond what they think, plus the only way you can change people's attitudes about something is staying in a relationship with them, are huge values of Methodists. And that's what we've always tried to do, especially around the LGBTQI issue. Well, as you probably know, everything pretty much fell apart up there on the UMC Mountaintop. A super restrictive plan received the majority vote. One that, well, if it gets ratified, would force me and all pastors to sign something promising we will never perform gay marriages, that we will never support the ordination of gay people in the church, that we will consider gay people loved by God, but they are in sin. Things that I personally find unconscionable, and I will tell you now that I will never sign something like that. And you can also know that I will never leave you. So we're all in this together, and there's a lot more about that to be talked about later. So, and I think that the reasons are many for this horrible time and this vote. And mostly it seems it's because a very conservative organization wanting to strong-arm the progressive branch of the Methodist Church spent a long time manipulating, especially delegates from our global church, where culture is generally more conservative. And there you have it. It may be that what was voted on is illegal in terms of Methodist law. But in any case, what we know of the denomination probably isn't anymore. Some mountaintop experience. But maybe that's why getting to hear and remember the one Jesus and his disciples had, in all its chaos and confusion and stripping down, is so helpful. Because maybe that's the thing we most need to do now. Listen. Listen to Jesus. Of course, we want to listen to one another too, especially our LGBTQI brothers and sisters, because they've been treated so horribly and have every reason to be hurting so horribly. But we bring Jesus into the mix, and we ask that he help us listen as he would, that the Christ in us takes the lead in listening. The disciples of old, and like the disciples of old, knowing that we cannot heal others, only Christ can. Only the Christ inside of us can heal others. Same with our dealings with those whom we don't agree. We're going to listen as Jesus would, as the Jesus inside of us listens. As we look ahead, things do look pretty rough, not unlike a journey to the cross. But the good news is that we have Lent to help make this a really good, meaningful, powerful journey to the cross this year. So we're especially ready and open to the glories of new life, resurrected new life. It will, like the resurrected Jesus, look something like what we recognize, but will be something far greater and mysterious. Jesus, when he came back from the tomb, people could kind of guess who he was, but still they didn't quite know because he was changed. That's what we're promised arises with the dawn. I wanted to share one more thing with you today, and this was something that I wanted to share with you last week, but we were so invested in learning about how to love our enemies that I didn't get a chance to share this. It's a blog post from the Reverend Sandy Olwine, who came through Zoom and spoke with us the week before our special general conference. She's a delegate to our annual conference. She went to St. Louis. And these are some words that she spoke actually before she left. And I wanted to share with you that last week then, but this week I think they're really good for us as well. She says, "The bags are packed and the materials I need in St. Louis are gathered. So so I guess I'm about ready for my 5:30 a.m. departure from LAX this morning. I am grateful and moved by the texts, messages, and emails of support, prayer, and love that I have received these last few days. How are you doing? Has been a frequent question. It isn't an easy query to respond to. Emotions are swirling and all over the map, and at the same time, numbness is present and prevalent. Walls are going up. I just am not ready for my heart to be shattered in a million bits. Do I expect that? Maybe. It has happened before. I do know that none of what is planned to be before us fully addresses the LGBTQI inclusion. Even the two plans that take out the restrictive language from the Book of Discipline will still cause or allow harm to continue. I feel like I have to ask my colleagues, friends, and parishioners, is this much pain acceptable to you? What level of non-acceptance can you live with to be a United Methodist? To be blunt, that is just F asterisk 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 ED up. And because the question for the conference has been posed in the context of maintaining unity of a global church, those of us longing for full inclusion can easily fall into the trap of blaming the global church, read Africa and the Philippines, for the harm which will continue to be perpetuated, which is a whole other layer of messed up. When I think about how much of the critical ministry being done in those places is needed as a result of centuries of colonialism, exploitation, and racism, the reality about ongoing harm takes on different dimensions. I sense these next few days will be spent trying to hold all of that and more in some sort of liminal space that allows the Spirit to move and the light of Christ to shine so a way forward can be found. Anyone who knows me knows that my heart belongs to my 3.5-year-old grandniece, Melody. Recently, she has been learning letters and beginning to read by making words out of sticky dots. A couple of days ago, Melody's mom, Carol, was explaining General Conference to her. She evidently didn't get it. She didn't understand why anyone would be against loving whoever you love. You have to adore little ones who know things we adults seem to forget. Then she requested that her dot work for the Davy Church. She proceeded to surround the word with felt hearts left over from a Valentine's Day craft I had given her. Melody also put one of the hearts on her shirt. When Carol asked why she had a sticker on her, Melody's response, as she petted the sticker, was, "To remember I have love in my heart." And this is actually, and this is included in the blog, was the picture that that little Melody had made. And you can see sort of a church out of sticky dots, and then all these hearts around it. And Sandy continues, as I leave for St. Louis, I know that my challenge is to listen, to share, to argue, yes, even to fight, with love in my heart. And I suspect this doesn't have much to do with my own love. My love will be too small, too selective, too easily frayed at the edges. No, the challenge will be to remember that it is God's love that needs to be in my heart, in all our hearts, if there is any possible chance that a way that moves us forward will bring healing, hope, and towards being the body of Christ that we are called to be. It is God's love that will make my love, my heart, bigger, stronger, braver, and clearer. She says, in the next few days, I pray that I will hold onto this promise and lean on it as I join the other delegates in the work before us. Maybe you will join me in that prayer? And then she concludes, if you see pictures of me with a felt heart on my shirt in the next few days, just know it is so I too will remember that I have love in my heart. I so love what Sandy said, and I think it's a wonderful opportunity for us to remember those lessons that little wonderful Melody taught us about the importance of always remembering that we have love, God's love, in our hearts. So I am inviting all of us at our communion time to, after we take communion, to receive a little sticky heart like the one I'm currently wearing, and to put it on. And to remember that today and as we move forward, we're going to listen to Jesus. We're going to strip everything back, and we're going to listen to him as in the spirit of a child that has a capacity to love that transcends most of the time our maturity. And we're going to see where that leads. Reminds me, my very favorite quote in the whole world is from Meister Eckhart, who says, God is not found in a process of addition, but is found in a process of subtraction. In the midst of all the chaos and hurt and anger that we are going through now, this may be a profound time, maybe the most profound time, to find Jesus, to find Christ, and to find ourselves as the community we have been called, invited, yet to be. As we prepare to join in the sacred meal of Holy Communion, I would ask that we sing one verse of a song that I think is really good for today. That song is Where He Leads Me, I Will Follow. It's number 338 in your large hymnal. We're just going to sing the first verse and then prepare ourselves for the next part of our service.